It's 2012. Gangnam Style is the latest dance trend, Barack Obama drone strikes his way into another presidential term, and the world is going to end. No, it's not. The Mayans just gave up on writing years of the future. You were likely spoiled with one of the many fantastic games to be released in this year, in an era I like to refer to as the bow year, because a lot of the AAA games that were shown off in this year just had a weird fascination with bows and arrows for some reason. Far Cry 3, the Tomb Raider reboot, Crysis 3, and many others. Now that's all well and good, but I'm an RPG player at heart. What is there for me in 2012? Mass Effect 3 would have gamers punching their TVs over the ending. Diablo 3 would have players not punching their TVs? I don't know, because I've never played any of the Diablo games. And of course, we can't forget the monumental touchstone of RPGs nowadays, Dark Souls. Prepare to Die edition. Even if you didn't have these high-profile titles, chances are you're still probably playing a small game from 2011. I don't know, maybe you've heard of it. It's a game called fucking Scrim. The effects of Bethesda's smash hit could still be felt even months after its release. So much so that pretty much every release during that time frame was regarded as a Skyrim clone or a Skyrim killer. Just like how every YouTuber that sits in front of a green screen is labeled as a Nakey Jakey clone. Dog bless. The Skyrim clone label was so overused that it actually turned into a meme with this legendary review of Far Cry 3. It's like Skyrim, but with guns. Little did we know this wouldn't be the last time we would hear about Adam Kovic and his gun. Game development is very cutthroat, and unfortunately at times the big dogs will completely steal the thunder from any other game released in that time frame. Such is the case with the hidden gem that is Dragon's Dogma. In short, Capcom released this game in 2012 with not a lot of recognition. They then released an updated version called Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen in 2014, which then started to earn this IP a cult following. I dumped a ton of hours into this game and patiently waited for the sequel. For 12 years. In 2022, our Lord and Savior Itsuno descends from the heavens in our time of need to bless us with the Holy Scripture in the form of a teaser video that essentially said, hey, we're working on the sequel, so please stop asking us about it.
Dragon's Dogma 2作ってます
And Dogma enthusiasts around the world sprayed Harspud juice all over their viewing devices. Then, in March of 2024, we finally got to sink our teeth into one of the best RPGs I have ever played, no bullshit. This is Dragon's Dogma 2. If I were to explain Dragon's Dogma in a nutshell, imagine if you took Shadow of the Colossus, Monster Hunter, a hint of old school JRPGs, and a pinch of Devil May Cry, and threw it all into a blender. The result is an endlessly satisfying and unforgettable experience that still hasn't been fully replicated today. It's an anomaly of gaming that can really only be done by Capcom. Most of the notable features of Dragon's Dogma included a flexible character creator, a layered armor and clothing system to bring out your inner fashionista, or fashion's dogma if you will, a unique fast travel system that requires rare resources to use, and the meat and potatoes of the game, the combat, boss climbing, and pawn system. You had 9 classes to pick from, known as vocations in-game. 3 starter vocations which developed into their own 3 specialized vocations, and 3 more hybrid vocations. Each vocation had their own strengths and weaknesses and utilized a DMC-like combo system and skill system to make combat frenetic and chaotic. Bosses stole the show with their imposing scale and were ripped straight from various cultures and mythology like chimeras and cyclopes. These bosses were massive, but you could even the odds by literally climbing onto them to hit various weak points, sometimes for the purpose of breaking apart and using it to enhance your gear. To help you out a bit more, you had access to pawns, who are AI-controlled teammates that'll learn from your quests, boss encounters, and combat style to adequately support you in your travels. You have 1 main pawn which can be freely customized, and 2 extra pawns that you can obtain from the Rift, where other players have their own main pawn available to hire, letting you set up your own RPG dream team at the cost of these guys sometimes looking like complete abominations and not shutting up. With a decent story and an addicting endgame gameplay loop, this game is classic, but it does show its age a bit. A lot of advanced mechanics aren't thoroughly explained to the player, like pawn commands that affect their inclination, and I still have to use a guide just to get me through the infamous Fornival quest, but this game set a great foundation for a sequel, so I was ecstatic to finally be experiencing it. One of the biggest draws of the first game at the time was with its robust character creation, giving the player an insane amount of control over their character and main pawn. After some introductory cutscenes, we can create our character, and boy did Capcom make some improvements here. It is so nice to finally see Dragon's Dogma in the Japanese black magic that is the RE engine. The graphics are fantastic, and you have even more control of your character than the first game. Not only can you change the angle of your character's elbows as they walk, but you have customization down to plucking out individual teeth, which is completely unnecessary, but damn is it fun to play around with. I've seen some nutty celebrity lookalikes, and I even had a crack at it myself. After we pick our starting vocation, more on that later, we're treated to some more cutscenes and a small tutorial boss to introduce us to the combat mechanics. Oh, and we can't forget Rook making a return. Looking good, buddy. We eventually get the chance to go out and explore, and I was pleasantly surprised by the changes to the world. This might be a hot take, but there wasn't really much to explore in the first game. The entire region of Grancis was your bog standard medieval forest, with a few landmarks here and there like the Hillfigure Knoll and a lake that blinded you, but the majority of the environments looked a little samey. The sequel improves upon this by having not just a medieval forest, but a medieval desert. Here you'll find an all-new race, the the Beastren. Aside from the new biomes, there's also just more stuff littered throughout the world to loot and explore. Fast travel is still limited, but port crystals and fairy stones make a return, and we also have access to ox carts that can be used from major cities to take you to various locations. Sometimes you'll encounter these carts just by running around, so it adds another layer of randomness to the overworld travel. Random encounters can also happen while traveling on a cart, like ogre ambushes and a dragon attack, so there's always a risk involved. Other than the fairy stones and carts, you'll be traveling on foot, and you're going to be doing it a lot. Some might even say this game is a bit of a walking simulator, which I would have to disagree with considering the options you have. The traveling is meant to be slow paced, as you now have health burn that can only be relieved by resting, whether that be at a rented room at an inn or by a very heavy camping kit that you can bring along your adventures. Camping spots are plentiful, and not only does it remove the stress of traveling at night, but you can now cook various meats to get some significant stat bonuses, and it goes into an actual real-life video of meat being cooked on a pan, which had the vegan community absolutely fuming, just like how this delicious meat is fuming. Dear Lord, I want to just consume that fucking meat raw like the caveman I am. The world of Dragon's Dogma 2 is fascinating in that all sorts of random shit will happen. The first game also did this pretty well with other pawns roaming around and random boss encounters, but the sequel takes it one step further. Sometimes you'll be strolling through town and a Drake will just roll through like he's delivering an Uber Eats order. Sometimes you'll be fighting a boss like an ogre when all of a sudden a griffin swoops in and joins the fight. And then an ox cart will roll through and all the passengers will take up arms and lend aid, leading to a complete mosh pit with bodies flying everywhere and massive spells filling up your screen. It is absolute chaos. You'll be giving food to a street urchin and stumble across an entire quest line with characters you'll end up seeing later on. Sometimes you'll help out an elf and he'll thank you in Elvish, which you can't understand unless one of your pawns has the ability to translate. There's so much randomness with the world, and that makes every playthrough unique. I mentioned this game to some of my coworkers, and they talked about how they discovered a shortcut to this one location, or how they managed to kill one of the dragons early on and looted a unique twin blade. It's those water cooler moments that I sorely miss from a game like this. There's all sorts of things to discover in the world, from unique armor pieces to spell tomes that can be used by non-mage characters, to even special beetles that can be used to increase your carry weight. So you're always rewarded for going off the beaten path, especially with the returning Seekers tokens, which can be spent at a vocation guild to obtain some unique rewards. Speaking of vocations, this is where some disappointment began. Dragon's Dogma had some interesting vocations, but I think everyone can agree that the Strider vocation was a de facto class to choose due to its versatility. Having access to both bow skills and dagger skills made this vocation incredibly flexible and absolutely nutty in terms of damage. Capcom made the wise decision to split the bow and daggers from Strider into two of their own classes, Archer and Thief, which opens up the possibility of these two vocations developing into their own specializations and branching out with more hybrids. The sequel brings to us the new newly added Trickster, the Mystic Spearhand, and the Warfarer, which is basically a revamped assassin from the first game. However, there's no Mystic Knight in Dragon's Dogma 2, which sucks for me because that was my favorite vocation. That being said, the new vocations are all unique and play fantastic. The combat is much more fluid than the first game, with basic attacks weaving into each other instead of being a 3-hit combo. The addition of sprint attacks helps with mobility, especially with the Archer vocation. Now all of the classes have the appropriate feel. Thieves and archers can zip around the battlefield, but warriors now have to charge their attacks for maximum damage, much like the Greatsword in Monster Hunter. Slow, methodical positioning will be the key to warrior gameplay. Grabbing and throwing small enemies and objects is back, which makes for some hilarious gaming moments. The skills all feel useful to their own degree, and I got that same feeling of anticipation to see what new skills I unlocked after leveling up my vocations. Capcom knows how to make combat look and feel good, with flashy animations and a slight hit stop effect to make every attack feel impactful. When you finally charge that Skyward Sunder and send that Griffin wheeling back, God, it feels so good. And the bosses, the bosses. With massive bosses being one of the focal points of the first game, it was imperative that Capcom improve upon the first game and flesh it out a bit more. And the boss fights are incredible. You can tell that Capcom took a few pages out of their own Monster Hunter series because there's so many ways a fight can go wrong and so many ways a fight can go right. Dragon's Dogma 2 introduces ragdoll physics, which wasn't in the first game. You wouldn't think that would be super significant, but getting yeeted off a cliff face by a pissed off ogre is very possible, and that's not something you see every day. The climbing has been majorly improved, with you being able to climb on top of each boss to the point where you can eventually stand up. This game gets some major style points. Not only can you climb on top of each boss, but if you're grounded, you can pull at their legs and cause them to lose their balance. Sometimes you can even witness two bosses fighting each other in the distance. Every boss fight feels dynamic and unique, and I don't see this getting old anytime soon, especially with the revamped pawn system. Pawns were a crucial part of the first game, but a lot of the stuff going on under the hood wasn't thoroughly explained. The sequel fixes that tenfold. Pawn inclination is available to be selected right at the start with a clear explanation. Pawn commands seemingly don't affect their inclination, and they're much more helpful with your quests. Sometimes even asking you to let them lead the party because their player already finished the quest you're currently on. And while they can still get annoying with a constant commentary, they'll sometimes engage in a conversation with each other, which helps to diversify the dialogue between them.
Would appreciate your swift return, Master. A fell unease begins to gnaw at me when you are gone over long.
It is not our place to hurry the arisen.
Some people have even complained about the pawn commentary, saying that it's problematic because if you have a full team of men, sometimes they'll make comments that kind of insinuates that you might be gay, which I find to be absolutely hilarious, but different strokes for different folks, I guess.
Looking around, it strikes me that we pawns are all men. I wonder if this speaks to the Arisen's preference.
It's surely a coincidence. Don't make such a fuss.
Since the pawns are created with the same character creator as the player, that means you have a massive range of faces and bodies to pick from. One thing I found really cool is that you can find rift crystals around the world that can either spawn a high-level pawn that can be hired for free, or you can summon a pawn that pertains to a certain theme. I found one where all of the pawns shared the same nickname as my pawn, one with all brawny pawns, one where all pawns had no traveling experience, and even one where the pawns have a distinctive upper half. It's always beneficial to frequently switch between pawns, as a player can now set a pawn quest that gives their main pawn a specific objective. If the other player completes that objective, then they'll obtain whatever item or amount of money you set for the reward, which is basically a form of trading. You get rift crystals by having your pawn being hired by other players, and in turn, they get the help from your pawn's world knowledge and whatever reward you offer them. Oh yeah, and they'll high-five you from time to time.
That was superb, Arisen!
That's always cool. The quests in Dragon's Dogma 2 are about as open-ended as the ones in the first game, and I absolutely love this, though understandably not everyone else will. There will be many times where you aren't given a quest marker pointing you to every objective. Sometimes you'll have to use your gamer brain and figure some stuff out, either by consulting with your pawns, talking with NPCs, or by just roaming around a bit and coming across your objective by chance. I really appreciate it when developers have the balls to not hold your hand in these scenarios. One quest had me looking for a boy who was abducted by wolves. So I had to ask the NPCs around town where they last saw him, and they all gave me conflicting answers. That's something you would naturally experience in this type of situation, so it adds to the immersion. This game does so much right, but where Capcom giveth, Capcom taketh. Most of you on PC are already aware of the game's poor reviews, so why is that? I just spent a lot of time gushing about this game. Well, there are definitely some setbacks. I'll get to the small ones first. The armor system was completely streamlined, removing the layered armor system that made the first game stand out from its competitors. Now don't get me wrong, the armor customization is still pretty good, and you can still look like a badass, but it could have been so much more, Capcom. It's even more streamlined than Skyrim's, and I didn't even know that was possible. All you have is the helmet, torso, and legs, and a cloak if you roll that way. That's not a lot of options. You'll also probably have to tweak some of the controls, as the button to interact with everything is the same button used to sprint, so oftentimes you'll try to say hi to someone just to bulldoze through them, and that's not nice. I recommend turning this off in the options and keeping the sprint to the left stick. Another issue is with the quests. As good as they can be, there has to be a balance with quests that come to you versus quests that you come to, and Dragon's Dogma 2 relies heavily on the former. Traveling to a new town can be painful, as every 2 steps you take, your attention gets yanked away from whatever objective you were doing to an NPC trying to give you another quest. I wouldn't mind if it was every now and then for a quest you really should be prioritizing, but this happens way too often, and I wish this was cut back a bit. Escort missions make a return, and while they're not consequential and are pretty much just open world filler, they can still get repetitive, especially in the Vermund region, as most of them require you to go all the way back to the entrance of town, and if you're hours into a trek trying to leave the city to go to a new location, that is the last thing you want to see. After doing 2 of these, I said fuck it and stopped doing them. Capcom also made a decision to have only 1 save file in the sequel, just like the first game. From what I can gather, the purpose of this is to avoid an overpopulation of pawns, since every player character has to have a main pawn, but come on guys, there has to be some other mechanic you can implement to counteract that while also having multiple save files. Obviously, there are ways to make multiple saves, especially on PC, but we shouldn't have to tamper with files outside of the game to get something that's available in just about every other RPG. Now we need to get to the elephant in the room: optional microtransactions. Wait, that's the big controversy? That's what people are complaining about? This is probably where I'm going to lose most people, because I really don't understand why people are as pissed off as they are about this. In typical Capcom fashion, Dragon's Dogma 2 includes small microtransactions that harken back to the good old Xbox Live days of including dozens of DLC packs, with completely unnecessary currencies and cosmetics that can be easily obtained in-game without having to pay. There is literally no point in getting these packs. However, that hasn't stopped people from picking up torches and pitchforks against Capcom just because of the fuckery to do something like that. Now, I'm not sucking off Capcom here. That is very dumb to do, especially in a time period where there is a growing distrust of AAA companies. But I'm going to have to point out a double standard here. The Resident Evil 4 remake, also released by Capcom, not only includes microtransactions that are not obtainable in-game, but you also have microtransactions that shortcut the progression and basically defeat the purpose of playing the game in multiple playthroughs. The major draw of RE4 was with the arcadey scoring system, all of the collectibles, and the crazy shit you had to put real time into to earn. But not if you fork over more smackaroos to Capcom. However, I haven't seen any complaints about this. At least not enough complaints to make it a viral gaming news headline. On a side note, I absolutely hate the argument that buying a game with microtransactions is supporting the shadiness that a company is engaging in, or it's opening the floodgates for worse offenses to happen in the future. I'm willing to bet my left testicle that the very same people that are making this argument also eat fast food, or meat in general for that matter, and frequently watch porn or pretty much any Hollywood movie or TV show. If you don't think there's any shadiness involved with that, then I don't know what to tell you. Now, just because they're hypocrites doesn't mean they're wrong, but lashing out at someone who's enjoying the game and calling them a corporate shill because they're excited for a game that they've waited 12 years for just makes you look jaded and miserable. Spend your money however you wish, but it's a waste of time and energy to get angry at other people spending their money however they wish. With all that said, I loved RE4 remake, but why is this okay and Dragon's Dogma 2 isn't? If I were to guess, it's probably because the game isn't very well optimized, and borderline unplayable for some people.
Just don't crash, just make it through, make it through. No, we came so far. I might not even get it on console just out of pure fucking principle. This is so unacceptable. What the fuck?
I'm able to run the game flawlessly, albeit with some slight frame drops in big cities, and I haven't had a single crash, but your mileage may vary. Add that onto the $70 price tag and the microtransactions, and you have a really bad look for your game. However, underneath all that AAA diarrhea is an absolute gem. Dragon's Dogma and its sequel is one of the most unique RPG experiences I've ever had. Elden Ring is one of my favorite RPGs of all time, but it's not the most unique. The Soulsborne formula has been easily imitated, with a long list of Souls-likes on the Steam store, but I have yet to play a game similar to Dragon's Dogma. Monster Hunter has a similar feel, but it's different in its own right. Other classic JRPGs have AI teammates, but it's not quite like the Pawns. It truly is one of the most unique action RPGs out there, and for that, this could very well be one of the best action RPGs of the modern era. Now let's get another Lost Planet sequel. Right? Capcom? You guys are working on a Lost Planet sequel? Please? So what did you guys think of the video? Did you like Dragon's Dogma 2? Are you waiting for an update? Or did the microtransactions turn you off? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about this. In the meantime, I'm going to be pointing out every ladder I see within a 50-foot radius. Peace.